All right, folks. Give me 2 seconds here. All right. Test. All right. Welcome, fellows, friends. Just quick public service. Yellow Can Cult. Join the Yellow Can Cult. We don't talk about blue chicken people or red browns or any of this. We talk about the Yellow Can. Um, if you don't see this Yellow Can label on a video on YouTube or channel, don't watch it. And we'll be good. So we're going to be talking about William F. Buckley, a part of the Buckley series. It's going to be ongoing. I just realized that Buckley was on the advisory council of the Heilinger Corporation, which is the merger between um, the Ariel Sharon party in Israel, their mega group that they founded over here, and uh, and British intelligence, long-standing British intelligence, SOE, um, networks that were here since, probably before World War One, through something called the Argus Corporation, and it's actually Justin Trudeau's father as prime minister that the SOE influence on business in Canada was so bad that the top 10 corporations were owned by these uh, parts of the economic warfare division under Edward Plunkett Taylor, under which the Argus Corporation, which became the Hollinger Corporation, became the Hollinger International, was under. So they basically, British intelligence basically controlled the Canadian economy, and it was so bad that the top 10 corporations in Canada were a derivative of this. Um, so there's one good thing about the Trudeau family, I guess, but the Hollinger Corporation became like the third largest media empire in the world. Um, and News Corp, I believe, was one of its uh, rivals in that whole thing. But both of them were proteges of British intelligence Lord Beaverbrook of the SOE. And I just found some interesting links between Lord Beaverbrook and the so-called traditional Catholic Chesterton operation, which started out Fabian Socialist and slowly merged with the British Union of Fascists, which was completely under control of the British Special Operations Executive. So, and Robert Fiore of Forza Nuova in Italy, which is kind of derivative of some of those uh, terrorist organizations associated with the Roman Mafia, the Pallavicini family. Robert Fiore was exposed by The Spectator of being an MI5 agent. And Roberto Fiore, was the guy that he somehow had access to all of G.K. Chesterton's papers after he died. So the myth of distributism as something other than one of these third positionist uh, red brown movements is completely absurd. Every day I find new reasons to debunk that. But yeah, hi everybody, and it's not Iron, it's Iron, like Ron, like Ronald. Um, I read old newspapers. I don't know what Mandela universe you're in, but thanks a lot. Nice to see you, Ralphiel and Econ Recon. So, without further ado, we're going to read this article called "The Christian Collision: The Nature of the Beast" by Anton Shaykin, and this was released April 22nd, 2005. Um, I heard we have some loyal followers of the Yellow Can. I hope we can get more Yellow Cans. Um, if you drink the Yellow Can, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. If you don't, give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll talk to your people and get you a full case of yerba mate sent to your house. So thanks a lot. Here we go. While many people are squawking about the fact that there being a religious right controlling the government, the reality is the present government, the Bush administration, and its friends created a pseudo religion like a Roman cult. And this is referring to kind of the Napoleonic Romantic period where Napoleon had considerable influence over the church and tried to make it into a cult of the state. And it is the religion which is being used as an instrument of tyranny by a rotten government. People talk about this religious right. There is no religious right. There is a state-based religion. That's a quote from somebody. That's a Lyndon LaRouche quote. Oh boy. I don't know which cult I like more, Lyndon LaRouche or the Yellow Can cult. It is a delusion that the array of pro-Bush religious fruitcake collection, built of a partnership forged in large part by Billy Graham between Jonathan Edwards and Darbyite Protestant fruitcakes and Dark Age fascist nominal Catholics, is a lobby directed to influence government. It is a Bush government-created state religion created and deployed to impose a de facto dictatorship on the United States, and that's Lyndon LaRouche again. I don't know. Pretty accurate statement. Um, a dictatorship needs revolutionaries to destroy the previous lawful nation and terrorize citizens into giving up their liberty, which is happening now. We have E. Michael Jones running the Dugan circuit. Just did a Casa Pound um, film festival called Decameron and is promoting Nazi communist director Pasolini, um, of which the film festival is named after his movie. And E. Michael Jones did the movie Salo and was promoting himself with pictures of nude minors across the internet. But E. Michael Jones is one of those people that's calling for America first and then also calling for the destruction of America. So isn't that wonderful? Um, E. Michael Jones is this kind of person. He fits into the neocon religious right, except he's part of the anti-Jewish wing of the neocon right. And but with his alignment with Dugan, it doesn't really make sense. These people will tell people what they want to hear in each of the countries, but yeah, probably a secret Zionist. I don't know. But going on, one cold night in 1980. Men selected for this role drove through the streets of Washington, D.C. with their windows down, singing an anarchist hymn cynically set to the tune of America the Beautiful. "'Tis, 'tis time to right the great wrong done 10,000 years ago. The state conceived in blood and hate remains our only foe. So circle, brothers, victory is nigh. Come meet thy fate, destroy the state, and raise black banners high." Now, where did this come from? Nina J. Easton, Gang of Five, leaders of the Center of Conservative Crusade. So that's from this biography, I guess, of these individuals that led the Conservative Crusade. Absolute anarchists. Um, and neoconservatism comes from Bakuninite um, anarcho-syndicalism. Just like, I guess, distributism was a reform of that. A lot of fascism, Casa Pound is anarcho-distributism, um, anarcho-syndicalism, whatever. Um, Going on, though. The raucous singers were Ralph Reed, who later created the Christian Coalition and became a top herder of religious voters, and Grover Norquist, who now presides at regular Wednesday Supreme Strategy meetings of the religious right and other components of the present regime. Reed and Norquist, together with young boss Jack Abramoff, had been put in charge of the National College Republicans at the outset of Ronald Reagan's presidency. This trio, Abramoff, CR chairman, Norquist, CR executive director, and Reed, their intern, later CR executive director, formed a covert partnership which has persisted to the present time. Recently, front page corruption scandals hitting House Majority Leader Tom DeLay, a Republican from Texas, has featured Jack Abramoff's wild influence selling adventures and Ralph Reed's bold and profitable manipulations of religious groups. With Norquist's key place in the schemes looming on the edge of the news coverage, and it says see box traveling partnership. We'll talk about that. DeLay's accelerated downfall has put the spotlight on these operatives' role in building up DeLay's dictatorship over the House of Representatives. Reed and his close allies have been at the center of the apparatus used by current Washington regime to attempt a consolidation of the coup d'etat to impose a dictatorship on the ruins of lawful government, with the Congress as a mere rubber stamp and the independent judiciary terrorized and taken down. The coup attempts continued now with an edge of real desperation in the face of more determined opposition. This Reed created Christian coalition with televangelist Pat Robertson as its public face has been the most significant element in religious right in the regime's bludgeon. Searching look at that group's background traced through the career of Reed, beginning with the College Republicans' 1980s leadership trio, yields some useful insights into the nature of the beast now confronting the Republic. Remember, Pat Robertson, CNP guy, also promoted Sun Young Moon. I think we have another article on Sun Young Moon coming up in relation with the Buckleys. Um, Absolute farce. Uh, Religion has been hijacked by this third positionist international, which the Buckleys represented, which Otto Habsburg represented. Um, and it's kind of sad for them because communism doesn't exist anymore. And now they're all jumping on the train with National Bolshevism. So, great wonder. Subheading: The College Republic on Fire. Abramov, Norquist, and Reed first came together in Washington in the spring of 1981. Abramov and Norquist have recently left college. Reed is still a student. They were determined to ride to power with the pro-feudal faction, then seeking to consolidate its power in an incoming administration of President Ronald Reagan and Vice President George H.W. Bush. In the college Republican leadership, there was no pretense of religion, no Christianity, just the revolution, the conservative revolution. The rush of adrenaline came from being plunged into powerful sponsors being on the inside, having the perceived authority from the lodge to tear down the hated old order, to instill fear and get away with it. We can better appreciate their state of mind if we take a hint from the second inaugural speech of President George W. Bush on January 20th, 2005, with reference to policy of limitless wars and regime changes. Bush's keepers had written the following for him to read. And I'm sorry I'm making mistakes. I have the corona. Okay. By our efforts, we have lit a fire as well, a fire in the minds of men. It warms those who feel its power. It burns those who fight its progress. And one day, this untamed fire of freedom will reach the darkest corners of the earth. The phrase fire in the minds of men comes from The Possessed, Fyodor Dostoevsky's novel about the demon-possessed nihilist revolutionaries of the 19th century Russia. Reminding you that the Dostoevsky came to its prominence in the West through George Lukács and the Frankfurt School, because their entire basis of destroying the West and cultural warfare against the West was based on Dostoevsky and making the West feel like they were godless, which is how we're criticized now um, as the godless liberal West. Uh, but yeah, a lot of people don't realize the Frankfurt School and George Lukács used weaponized Christianity as a part of their system, and there's a lot of people in the traditionalist um, minority that have been roped into this. But even here, this is Fyodor Dostoevsky talking negatively about the nihilist revolutionaries, and they're borrowing this idea to describe themselves, which is very curious. In the book, the governor of the province looks with despair on a fire they have set that is sweeping through a town. He says, "The fire is in the minds of men, not on the roofs of the houses." Those nihilists in Tsarist Russia had rejected the view of man as in the image of God, which, the Orthodox already do because they deny the Filioque. And the old believers especially do, um, because they're basically Satanists. Held by monotheistic religions while adopting Nietzsche's contemptuous opinion that man is only his base appetites, a worm who must be ruled by stronger, the Superman. Abraham Lincoln's ambassador to Russia, Cassius Clay, wrote in his memoirs that the nihilists who set fire to Russian cities in the 1860s and issued incendiary anarchist leaflets were, for the most part, aristocrats who represented the nation's progress out of feudalism. And a lot of them were involved with Optina Pustin and the Russian religious revival around Hesychasm as well. Um, that comes a little later, though. As for the young nihilists in Washington, 1981, 83, Reed, Norquist, and Abramoff, they were in the vanguard, overthrowing the old industrial America of Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, backed by Richard Mellon Scaife, who was the primary guy that gave Trump his original platform. Through Newsmax in 2008. Trump was supposed to host the Newsmax Republican debates, and somebody shut it down. But there's another big article on the Scaife family that I want to go into. But yes, Richard Mellon Scaife. And the Coors Brewery family, they made war on labor unions and the war to destroy the steel mills and machine industry in the northern states. Where high wages had been protected by U.S. tariffs, they incited the rabble against civil rights in a war on the poor. This was the era of the 20% interest rates, as Federal Reserve Chairman Paul Volcker promised the controlling disintegration of domestic industry and the shift to cheap overseas labor. The untamed fire of freedom was unlimited expansion of money fortunes from gambling in the new borderless, radically deregulated economy. That was the great boom time of the financiers' black economy of narcotics, pornography, and casinos. The ideological gods of those college Republicans were Friedrich von Hayek, whose book, The Road to Serfdom, demanded a world government to crush national sovereignty at the behest of the pan European movement, which controlled him, and the Fabian socialists that produced him um, through initially, I think he's associated one of the biggest speakers at what's called the Walter Lippmann colloque. Walter Lippmann, the famous Fabian socialist who um, founded kind of public relations and founded the Council on Foreign Relations. Yes. 26 so here's an aside, but it's an important aside. 26 individuals, including some of the most prominent liberal thinkers, took part in the Walter Lippmann colloque. The participants chose to set up organization to promote liberalism, which was called at the Committee International d'études pour la Nouveau du Liberalisme, CIERL. Through CIERL had few consequences because of the war. It inspired Friedrich Hayek in the post-war creation of the Mont Pelerin Society, which was also a joint operation with Otto Habsburg and his pan-European program. The whole idea is to destroy nation states. This is what Alexander Dugin essentially wants to do, whether he says it or not. Um, and Michel Foucault, Collège de France lectures, published a quarter of a century later as The Birth of Biopolitics, drew attention to the importance of the Walter Lippmann colloquium. Yes, and this is the group that coined the term neoliberalism. Alexander Rustow. Okay. So very important connection there. All the way back to, cementizing, reifying, whatever. Not really reifying, that's silly. Um, hooking everything together, though, that we've been talking about over all these months. You're getting a college education here for free. Give me 2 likes. Man. Let's continue to read, if I can find it. So, So we talked about Friedrich von Hayek as the ideological god of the college Republicans, and then the other one is another Otto Habsburg friend and friend of the WADL or ACL, yeah, World Anti-Communist League, National Review owner William F. Buckley, the brash, dark age fascist Catholic leader whose intrigues would shape Ralph Reed's course in the forging of the Christian coalition. Um, Their spiritual mentor was Newt Gingrich, yet another Fabian and a self-proclaimed futurist who wrote a foreword to Gingrich was full of third wave fad of futurist Alvin Toffler and Malthusian Jeremy Rifkin. The old days of man dominating and transforming nature are gone. Now in the new age, scarce resource created by shit. There's no reason I should have been disconnected. I guess. Hello? Hello? What the fuck? Okay, I guess we're back. I don't know. I guess you can't mention something. I don't know. The leadership group reportedly asked each of the cadres going out to build college Republican cells on campus to memorize a diatribe with the words, "The Democrats are the enemy, wade into them, spill their blood, shoot them in their belly." That's from that same biography. Now, this is all documented in the book. Ena J. Easton, Gang of Five, Leaders of the Center of the Conservative Crusade. So you have that is equally as degenerate, if not more degenerate than the Democrats. Okay. The provocative tactics and sneering partisan attitude of these hard drinking college Republicans did not ingratiate them with President Reagan, and they had no access to him. Soon, the particular avenue through which the trio had taken over the group became extremely messy. Jack Abramoff's father was chief his father's employer and the family patron who gave Jack Abramoff his entry to higher politics and international intrigue. Bloomingdale was an early California backer, confidant of Ronald Reagan, and Reagan, as president, appointed Bloomingdale to the president's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. Elected and financially sustained as college Republican chairman through Bloomingdale's wealth and connections, Abramoff brought in Grover Norquist, who had been a fellow Massachusetts Republican student activist, as executive director. The 20-year-old Ralph Reed, notorious as a cynical, dirty trickster among Republicans at the University of Georgia, came in first as an intern with Abramoff, sleeping in Abramoff's residence. Problems developed when Alfred, I have corona, okay? Alfred Bloomingdale was accused of taking videotapes of his own sadomasochistic orgies with government leaders and call girls, and their allegations became embarrassing and a serious potential blackmail from Reagan administration. Bloomingdale's PFIAB access to sensitive intelligence added to the complications. Bloomingdale conveniently died in 1982. The first try at state religion. The Abramoff Reed Norquist trio. And here's the thing: you have these people in the CNP that are trying to impose a state religion that are supposedly radical trad Catholics aligned with the Falangist Carlist movement that eventually became communist in Spain. Um, Real terrorist groups that kill a lot of people based on religious warfare, and yet they're willing to kill somebody because they followed the wrong or something, even though they're fellow Catholics. But here in the United States, they're willing to work with all of these groups of cults and in Protestant cults and all of that. And this is somehow the Catholic state religion. This is somehow something that all Catholics in America should be supporting. In it's complete nonsense. Um, and this is why Catholics should not be for state religion in the United States. Because you're not going to get it. It's not going to happen. It's going to be used by these kinds of people. You can't get that through your brain. I don't know what to tell you. Look at history. Look at the history of all of these radical integralist movements. They don't work because they're not run by Catholics, and also because they're anti-clerical. It completely does away with the proper distinction between church and state. Buckley, okay, the Abramoff, Reed, Norquist trio were apprentices serving not the president, but the faction operated what came to be known as the Iran-Contra affair as a parallel government away from public view. Buckley, an ultra-rightist Catholic, Paul Weyrich, I think associated with the whole Carlist apparatus here in the United States, had founded the Heritage Foundation in 1973 and had turned its control over to the international financier strategists associated with von Hayek's Mont Pelerin Society, including Otto Habsburg. The bankers and feudal spooks at Heritage, with their members in many government posts after Reagan's 1980 election, prescribed the dismantling protection for decent living foreign policy coupled with radical free trade. Hayek's very powerful supernatural authority. Now, it is not so easy to get working people to acquiesce in, let alone actively favor measures which destroy their families, steal their pensions, and kill their grandmothers. You have to get someone to whisper in their ears something like, homosexuals are going to marry your son. Oh, man, this old trick. Why does E. Michael Jones say America is the great Satan? As you know, something that's exactly in line with what Dugan says the cultural warfare against the United States has to be to make the world believe that the United States is the Antichrist. What does E. Michael Jones do when he's quoting the Ayatollah Khomeini, who ran terrorist operations here inside the United States? What does E. Michael Jones say? What does Eugene say? Eugene says, America is the great Satan. What more proof do you need that it allows homosexual marriage? Same thing. Same tactics as the neocons. Except he's doing it on behalf of Russian foreign intelligence, which is even more traitorous. Partially by a Soviet program, partially by an MI6 program, partially by um, the Eastern establishment here in the United States, the liberal Eastern establishment, the libertarian establishment. The libertarians did this, not liberalism in the old sense. That's the other thing. They fail to make any distinctions. But even the United States wasn't liberal. You can't be a liberal and be a Republican in the small R Republican. But these people just smash everything together. It's always slippery slope fallacy, even though they're the ones that are actually on extreme slippery slopes. Anyway, homosexuals are going to marry your son. This is precisely what Reed and his Christian coalition networks were to do in the 2004 elections, to get them to vote for a team that would steal everything from them. The initiatives of accomplish this popular self-degradation was to set in motion. That means you got to vote for President Bush. There's no such thing. If you actually want to do your duty as an American citizen, as a Catholic, you should try to form your own party that's based on Catholic teaching, but not on trying to establish some sort of theocracy, but simply anti-usury, your cultural side, anti-homosexual marriage, but then also promote these Catholic economic ideas that go all the way back to Jean-Baptiste Colbert, that are far better than the idiot Heinrich Pesch, Wittelsbach Bilderberger family idea of solidarism, which E. Michael Jones promotes, and Christendom College promotes, which is a Buckley family creation, and also what E. Michael Jones says is a CIA operation, but then still quotes their sources on solidarism, about how great solidarism accomplished. The popular self-degradation was set in motion in the early Reagan years. The Covert Council for National Policy, ding, 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 ding. I hope John Bresson's listening. Council for National Policy. There's 7 people here, and I only have 4 likes. That's my mom and my dad and my brother. That's 3 people that like me. And then Raphael. Okay, we need more likes. This is pathetic. and bankers into a new power structure congruent with attempt at dictatorship. Later in 1999, Texas Governor George W. Bush would speak to a secret CNP meeting in San Antonio. They would accomplish together in his projected presidency to the present time. Bush will not release any details of the speech at that meeting. I'm going to put this article in the chat because there's some pretty pictures. If you look at pretty pictures, you can give me a like. I don't know. But there's a pretty. Okay, it is worthwhile identifying some of the CNP founders, the choice assortments of pagan bankers, fascist ideologues, and the cheapest, most cynical manipulants of religious mob opinion. Early CNP directors include Heritage Foundation President Edward Fulner, a later president of Mont Pelerin, a very close associate of William F. Buckley, Paul Weyrich, founding treasurer of the CNP, founding president of the Heritage Foundation, anti-pope, ultra-Catholic pioneer of the religious right, marriage with bankers. Also, Reverend Jerry Falwell, whose moral majority group was started at Weyrich's suggestion. General John K. Singlaub, through the World Anti-Communist League, a manager of relations between old German Nazis and South American dictators. So also in there you have the propaganda duo Lodge of Licio and the Duke of Kent. Morton Blackwell, a youth trainer initially in charge of Reagan administration's religious outreach. Televangelist Pat Robertson, later chairman of the Christian Coalition. Tim LaHaye, author of Left Behind novels on end-time rapture. Founding president of CNP. Thomas Ellis, a wealthy eugenics fanatic and a manager of campaigns and funding for Senator Jesse Helms from North Carolina, who was the second president of the CNP, replacing LaHaye. And that's the other thing about the pro-life movement is, if you go back and look at the history of the pro-life movement, a lot of these people are pro-eugenics, a lot of these people are pro-hospice, a lot of these people are pro-death penalty, they're pro-population reduction, population control. And a lot of Catholics won't talk about that because it runs so deep in creating that single issue of abortion instead of an all-out front against these things that go very much against the dignity of mankind as the image of the living God. Reed, Abramoff, and Norquist left the college Republicans in 1984, going their separate ways for new political adventures, but maintaining their unofficial partnership. Here's a note. Footnote: Grover Norquist joined the management of the radical Muslim Mujahideen in Southwest Asia, the Iran contract networks of criminals and terrorists fighting the Soviets and systematically producing an anti-Western time bomb. Ooh. The photos of himself waving rifles around with decorate Norquist office walls, which decorate Norquist's office walls, date from these episodes. Interesting. Could he have helped groom some of these networks for people like Dugan and the Eurasianists? Who knows? Jack Abramoff did propaganda sponsored by the military service of the apartheid police state of South Africa and the casinos there and the Bantustans of the country's slave-like black population were the models upon which he was to build his fortune out of the misery of the American Indians. I think that's it for those two guys. This footnote might go on, though. Oh, man, but there's some stuff coming up. Okay. What the hell? What the deuce? What the deuce? That's how William F. Buckley talks. Reed now embarked on an experimental, entirely covert assignment through the Christian Coalition to emerge several years later. As head of Students for America, he would be one of the field leaders for the feudal heritage CNP faction aiming at dictatorship and state religion. In this enterprise 20 years ago, the nominal Catholic, Protestant, and Jewish elements of the current Bush fascist fruitcake array all made their appearances, as we shall see. So here's the Catholic operation. In the spring of 1984, William F. Buckley's top lieutenant, Marvin Liebman, devised what came to be known as Students for America and put Ralph Reed in charge of it. Later, after Reed had made headlines with Christian Coalition, Liebman told his colleagues that he would be proud to have groomed Reed for his distinguished career. And the next page, if you flip, it has that picture in the icon where Buckley is like nuzzling up against Henry Kissinger. Liebman was midwife to the most radically rightist movement of the age. He personally helped to set the global agenda which Reed and his colleagues were to follow all the way to the present time. Liebman's 1992 autobiography, Coming Out Conservative, isn't that like a gay reference, a gay allusion? I don't know. Coming Out Conservative gives only a dim, sterilized version of the astonishing life of the covert operative. Liebman's papers from the archives at Stanford University Hoover Institution and personal interviews with those who knew and worked with him have given us a somewhat more complete view. Liebman was bullied, fearful child, a victimized Jew who became a communist and a homosexual. So it is. It is. It is a gay illusion. I'm not just seeing things. And a Zionist in the camp of the Jabotinskyites who formed the Israeli Right. The Nazis killed his European relatives and went to work as a strategist and publicist for the managers of fascism. His autobiography laments the right-wing movement he built became bigoted. Liebman led a strange crew around Buckley's magazine National Review, creating the Young Americans for Freedom and the whole conservative movement in the 1960s. Younger colleagues have related their shock and puzzlement over the discovery that so many of the rightist leaders were homosexuals, or as one old-timer recently put it, self-hating, gay-bashing gays. Nick Fuentes, Roy Cohn, Oliver Stone, or Roger Stone, trisexual Roger Stone, Alex Jones, never sucked a ding-dong. Yeah, who's the other guy? Oh, Michael Voris, Milo. Oh man. Liebman formed the Committee of 1 Million, the anti-communist China of lobby, and took Taiwanese, Japanese war criminals, Korean pushtists, and Sun Myung Moon agents making up the People's Anti-Communist League into a global team of action with the Buckley Family networks in Ibero-America and the old European Franco-Hitlerite movements in many countries. He helped build the Cuban exile guerrilla group Alpha 66 and Caribbean Mexican underground movement of hatred against President John Kennedy, remembering Alpha 66 linked to Augusto Pinochet's DINA terrorist activities. I mean, they carried out the terrorist activities in the United States, blew up a jetliner with 77 civilians, dozens of bombs set off in Miami, car bombs set off in Washington, D.C. And somehow we never hear about this with people like Marco Rubio or when John McCain was still chugging around. Never hear about these attacks on U.S. soil that are basically worse than anything Al Qaeda ever did, except that one time. More organized, I guess I'd say, than Al Qaeda. I mean, 9/11 was pretty bad. Um, but yeah, it happened before Al Qaeda, and actually quite scarier, to be honest. But anyway, going on, Liebman boasted in his autobiography that he personally planned a world anti-communist revolution. He went to Mexico and started a worldwide organization through the networks of Jorge Prieto Lawrence and his Guadalajara-based Ticos group, a Mexican Catholic synarchist gang more anti-Semitic than Hitler. They allied with... Okay, so here's the note on that. Just out of Yale, 1951, William F. Buckley Jr. had joined the CIA and moved to Mexico, where he activated his oil man father's synarchist Mexican networks. That is the Mexican Synarchist Union and the PAN Party, Mexican Action Party, or whatever the hell. Buckley made his nominal Mexico City station boss, CIA covert operations executive E. Howard Hunt, an appendage of the Buckley family. Buckley moved to the United States while Hunt stayed to lead Mexican and Central American covert operations. Hunt would pioneer the organization of Nazis and far-right Catholics in that region into the Buckleyite World Anti-Communist League of the 1960s. As a Buckley loyalist, Hunt would shepherd the Cuban exile cadres who were instrumental in the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion, of interest in the 1963 Kennedy assassination, and all around him in the 1972 Watergate caper. When Hunt was arrested as mastermind of the break-in, Buckley organized his defense and became the guardian of Hunt's children. Hunt's covert CIA operations were coordinated with William Buckley's brother Reed, who had moved to Franco, Spain, and his brother-in-law Brent Bozell, founder of that little boys' town there, gave out the helped them fundraise when they were starting. Who had set up in Spain a pro-feudal, pro-fascist Catholic movement called the Society for the Christian Commonwealth. This Buckley enterprise was transplanted into Front Royal, Virginia as Christendom College, and allowed for a pivot for the Catholic rightists Paul Weyrich, Antonin Scalia, who were to ally themselves with Protestant evangelicals. But going back, so we're talking about Liebman when he goes to Mexico through the networks of Jorge Prieto Lawrence. He allied with the Eastern European Anti-Bolshevik Bloc of Nations, ABN, which had survived from Nazi anti-Comintern Axis. In 1966, this whole Buckleyite alliance was christened the World Anti-Communist League, WACL. Here was the Catholic realm into which Reed Students for America plunged when the group carried out campus rallies in favor of Oliver North's Nicaraguan Contras, and these are the personal ties which brought Reed into the inner sanctum. WACL's action enterprise Operation Condor, this is the operation under which these Cuban exiles set off all the bombs in Miami, Washington, D.C. on jet planes, was the code name for the combination of intelligence service and secret police of Chile's dictator General Augusto Pinochet with the forces of South American dictatorships advised by German Nazi war criminals Klaus Barbie and Walter Rauff to hunt down and murder common enemies. I read old magazines. No, that's me. I read old newspapers. We've read the documents, and Reclus, VISUP, VISUP, great stuff on Augusto Pinochet and his obsession with psychological warfare, as it ties into our research in the United States, successor programs, the MK Ultra, whatever, concerning mass psyops. You should look into that. It's a good program. VISUP also has tons of stuff on his, the same kind of stuff I talk about here on his blog. Just so much information. So I encourage you to go look at that. So as Operation Condor got underway in 1975, the Chilean government arranged with the Buckley family to make Marvin Lieberman officially a public relations consultant, the manager of dictatorship's propaganda within the United States. Lieberman's American-Chilean Council worked for some 4 years as the bodies piled up in South America until President Jimmy Carter's Justice Department closed the council down because Liebman had not registered it as a foreign agent. Okay. Number 2. So we talked about the Catholic fifth column around the CNP. Here's the Protestant fifth column. Marvin Liebman wrote that he advised Reed to set up the new movement's headquarters outside of Washington. North Carolina was the target. But the enterprise became involved in an ugly scandal, and Liebman is at pains to disclaim responsibility for his brainchild, writing that the group took an evil turn to the religious right. Curiously, Liebman himself had just converted to Catholicism in 1980 with William Buckley as his godfather. I guess that's William Buckley Sr., I don't know. And as if to qualify for this mission, Ralph Reed began reporting that he too had something of a conversion to faith. Late in 1983, a light conversation by sober accountants. Students for America crept into the news in 1985 in the context of allegations that students brainwashed by religious cult leaders were being used as zombie cadres for international rightist politics. The Wall Street Journal reported on August 16, 1985, on the Maranatha Ministries, whose student soldiers constituted the core members of Reed organization. The Wall Street Journal, investigative reporter John Fialka wrote that the Maranatha leader, Bob Weiner Jr., says he called some of his friends and suggested that they organize to support aid to the rebel forces in Nicaragua. And so, on the eve of the crucial vote in the Congress, the rallies were held on as many as 70 college campuses around the U.S. Events like this have made the little known Mr. Weiner popular with conservative Republican strategists. Mr. Weiner's friends are leaders of the 50 chapters of the Maranatha, Maranatha Christian Church, which has attracted 3,500 to 4,000 members, mostly of college age. The group imposes unusually strong discipline upon its members. It is drawing criticism from increasingly number of angry parents, Maranatha dropouts, and other religious leaders. They complain that Maranatha uses a form of mind control that isolates students from their parents and then guides decisions on such personal matters as career choices, politics, and marriage. Gee, sounds a lot like Opus Dei, which is behind Michael Voris and E. Michael Jones, even if he doesn't want to admit it. I mean, E. Michael Jones is kind of like a whore. I think he works for whoever gives him a paycheck. Um, uh, but people like Michael Voris are denying that Opus Dei gave him any money, even though I think Mark Brammer invested like 25,000 or no 250,000 into Church Militant TV. And it seems like Dr. Taylor Marshall is an Opus Dei supernumerary. And strangely enough, he paid the airfare for a Habsburg count, a count family that was given a barony under Habsburgs in Austria. He paid the airfare for this individual to go and throw the Pachamama statues into the river. Well, why is this little guy, this guy that's like 5'7" or something, he's like Joe Rogan sized. But no, this little guy, probably not a lot of money. Why is he the one that's paying the airfare for a baron, for a noble in Europe? Well, it's probably because he's a supernumerary of Opus Dei, and therefore it's the organization that's paying this guy and not Dr. Taylor Marshall. So a lot of Catholic media controlled by Opus Dei, and that's all wrapped around in this stupid network. I'm going to add alongside these brainwashing cults, TFP, as I often talk about, tradition, family, and property. Um, Same thing, organized Operation Condor through the Horvat family that runs Tradition and Action today. Um, and they were involved with all sorts of narco-terrorist operations in South America. Funny that a lot of the Catholic right is pro decriminalization of drugs. Um, you don't, a lot of trad cats are like, well, it's good to, you know, it's okay to experiment with all these psychedelics and stuff, whatever. But anyway, we're going on because we're talking about the Protestants right now. Okay, we got hate Protestants, fake Protestants as much as fake Catholics. I'm just kidding. Pray for them. A lot of these people, like I said, they're brainwashed and they don't realize this is just a whole postmodern reconstruction of the past by postmodernists, um, trying to trap you into like almost curating your culture. So you have to study history in order to break out of these little display cases they put you in and let you out when they want to deploy you for something. Uh, After going through episodes of mind control, psychiatric hospitalization, and youth suicide attempts, the New York uh, Wall Street Journal articles bring in Reed. Others defend the church. I think Maranatha, I can't pronounce. I have Corona, but this is also a stupid name. It has too many vowels to be a valid church. I think the Maranatha has gotten a bum rap, asserts Ralph Reed, a former college youth Republican leader who has formed Students for America to lobby for President Reagan's policies on campuses. The 4,000 member group, he says, includes over 1,000 members from Maranatha. So 1/4 of the college young Republicans is from the church that these guys founded. Here's a footnote. Maranatha began recruiting what would eventually be called Ralph Reed's cult troops by harvesting the burned out drug users and sex freaks, the California human wreckage from the 1960s, who had become Jesus people. Um, People don't believe me when I say a lot of former hippies became neoconservatives, became the Christian right. It's the same. It's the same fucking thing. It's this uh, imbalance of spiritual values versus the material world. And we'll talk about someday um, how the worship of money is not materialism because money is ephemeral. Okay. If we were real Christians, we would be both materialistic and spiritual, meaning we would want to build like the ancient city builders. Like Christ was a city builder. He built the city of Nazareth as a carpenter with his father. Um, and a construction crews there, but that's why he was living in Nazareth. Um, that you have to be materialistic and spiritual, and you cannot set these things against each other. Otherwise, you become a hippie, you become a new ager, you become an Age of Aquarius individual. Even if you're over there in your little traditionalist cult, you're still a new ager. Sorry to break it to you. That dialectic was made up by New Agers. Joseph de Maistre was a Gnostic heretic. Okay, that's your founder of your traditionalist movement, self-labeled. And Charles Baudelaire, who was basically said that Joseph de Maistre taught him how to think. Joseph de Maistre was his strongest influence, created modernism. And that dialectic is from the same kinds of forces, both Rosicrucians under the Martinist Lodge system. If you continue to be stuck in that dialectic, you're going to have a bad time. But we're talking about the Jesus people as a footnote. I gave you a footnote to the footnote. This was an international technology. Efrain Rios Montt was a pastor of California's El Verbo, the Word Church, a zombie factory on precisely the Maranatha pattern. Its victims drawn from the Jesus freak street people. In 1982, Rios Montt headed the military junta that overthrew the government of Guatemala, becoming president from August 1982 to August 1983. So this pastor from a Jesus freak church becomes a military junta leader in Guatemala. Gee, wow. Okay. Let's go on. So that was the end of that, and now we're getting into the Jewish connection. Oh, spooky. A Jewish connection. Now it's Jewish in quotes. All these things are Protestant in quotes, Catholic in quotes, because none of these religions even necessitate the kinds of things that are being done. These are cynical atheists that are hiding behind religion to be edgy. In its founding year, 1984, Reed's campus evangelical Students for America crowded into North Carolina for their main task. Oh man, I still have 7 people watching me. 7 feds. That's nice. We've got some influence. We can start our new House Committee on Anti-American Activities. And jail some of these people. Why were Reed sponsors at the Heritage Foundation and Council for National Policy so concerned with Jesse Helms? He was a far-right, opportunistic Southern politician managed by sick racist Tom Ellis, but Helms was a demagogic populist. He made noises against the elites, against Kissinger, against Rockefeller. He was neutral on Israel. Israel was now at the top of the imperial agenda. If you want to make people so crazy they will cheer for your own impoverishment and unending war, get them to hope for the end of the world, coming through an Israel-centered final battle of Armageddon ordained by God. And the most fanatical advocates of a new one-world empire at the moment were the neoconservatives, with their special relationship to the fascist end of Israeli political spectrum. After North Carolina, Jewish voters were inundated with anti-Helms messages. Helms was informed that he would have to get with the pro-Israeli program. The gangster lawyer Roy Cohn, William Buckley pal, muscled into the Helms campaign planning. Cohn was to see it that the wealthy New York Jews did not fund Helms' election opponent if Helms joined with the Israeli End Times Alliance. The Reverend Jerry Falwell, who had just gotten a private jet and the Jabotinsky Medal from Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, brought his moral majority cadres into a door-to-door crusade for Jesse Helms. And televangelist Pat Robertson, a fanatical Middle East war advocate, was an avid supporter of Helms, who managed to secure re-election with spiritual support. After 1984 and after his 1990 re-election under similar auspices, what may be termed traditional Republican conservatives were purged from the Helms staff, and the political machine of Senator Helms became a powerful international base for the most extreme theocratic rightists. The network intertwined. The mid-1980s Reed enterprise was a small part of a first attempt at a nightmare regime that has come closer to success under the current Bush administration. Note that in 1984, Robert Wiener, who herded Maranatha zombies for Reed's group, was on the CNP board of directors. 2. Tom Ellis, for whom Reed's group worked to elect Senator Jesse Helms, had just been the CNP president, 1982 to 83. 3. General John Singlaub, co-founder of the CNP and the Reagan administration designated procurer of covert legal funding of Nicaraguan Contras, was, as of 1984, chairman of the Nazi International's World Anti-Communist League in support of those whose politics Reed drove his student members. So here's another note on Thomas Ellis, who was Senator Helms, for whom Reed's group worked to elect Senator Helms. I guess who was in charge of Reed for the Helms campaign. Here's a little footnote. The above-cited Wall Street Journal article informs us that CNP co-founder Morton C. Blackwell, a former special assistant to President Reagan, says he suggested that the president write a letter lauding Maranatha. He says, "I've not seen anything in their doctrines which is outside the Christian tradition." He says Mr. Blackwell currently holds intensive 2-day seminars to teach conservative young people how to become political organizers. So far, he says about 10% of 400 people who have gone through the seminars have been members of Maranatha. One of them, Claude Allen, directed young volunteers for the successful 1984 campaign to re-elect GOP Senator Jesse Helms of North Carolina. Note that in January 2005, President George W. Bush chose the same Claude Allen as White House domestic policy advisor, after Senate Democrats allied Allen's confirmation to federal judgeship. Okay. So here's your 1980s Christian Coalition network. The Christian Coalition, DeLay, and Bush. Students for America gave Pat Robertson its Man of the Year award in 1988. At the awards dinner in January 1989, Reed sat down with Robertson, and they began discussions which led to the forming of the Christian Coalition later that year. Executive Director Reed, prodigy of the world's most reactionary bankers, had access to money and political networks to start the Christian Coalition on the local and state level throughout the country. The new organization soon got into gear with a neat, under-the-radar trick. The National Republican Senatorial Committee gave it $64,000 to the Christian Coalition, though the coalition claimed tax exemption as a 501c social welfare organization. Footnote: Ron Fournier of the Associated Press reported on June 10, 1999, that the Internal Revenue Service had concluded years of investigation by finally denying tax-exempt status to the Christian Coalition, causing the group to carry out legal reorganization, through which it sought to qualify some spin-offs as tax-exempt. In October 1990, just before the November election, to keep the captive Jesse Helms in the Senate, the group distributed 750,000 voter guides, mainly through churches, on the Sunday before the Tuesday election. Helms came from behind to win. Reed's professional reputation was now assured. "I want to be invisible," Reed gloated to the Virginian Pilot in November 1991. I paint my face and travel at night. You don't know it's over until you're in a body bag. You don't know until election night. The 1994 Conservative Revolution takeover of the Congress led to another rise in the influence of Reed and his allies. But the headline revolutionary, the new Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, soon afterwards flamed out politically, and Tom DeLay steadily rose with the special backing of the Christian Coalition. DeLay's career and power became at the same time a central project for all three of the shadow partners, Grover Norquist, Jack Abramoff, and Ralph Reed. DeLay was by no means a random point of interest. Tom DeLay staggered into Washington as a freshman congressman in 1984, a terrible drunk, his life dissolving. Representative Frank Wolf, Republican from Virginia, approached him with a road to salvation. He reportedly showed DeLay a videotape that made him weep. Tom DeLay then radically changed his life, turning his soul over to the higher powers. But by all reliable accounts, DeLay became a much nastier, a fearsomely unchristian individual. Frank Wolf represents an old black operations soul robbing agency known as the Fellowship Foundation, practicing secrecy on about the same level as National Security Agency. The Fellowship does not conduct one public function. It runs the huge, or does conduct one public function. It runs the huge annual congressional presidential prayer breakfast in Washington, with similar events managed inside the Pentagon and other government and military sites. The Fellowship Foundation, earlier called International Christian Leadership, and a succession of covert names, was created before World War II by organization of the pro-Nazi Frank Buchman. So we've got another little note here. It says, see Lawrence Hecht, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, the No Soul Gang behind Reverend Moon's Gnostic sex cult. Published December 20th, 2002. So there will be more about the Fellowship Foundation and Nazi Frank Buchman in that article. Senator H. Alexander Smith, a Republican from New Jersey, Buchman's lieutenant, who in 1940 had called for a joint world dictatorship of the United States, Britain, and Nazi Germany, brought the fellowship into acceptance in Washington. In the 1950s, the group was sponsored by former Nazi SS officer Holland's Prince Bernhard and the Dutch royal family. So the same people that are running the largest eco-fascist groups like WWF, Fauna Flora Society, all of those things. Prince Bernhard. Isn't that wonderful? The fellowship runs a house near the U.S. Capitol where congressmen and senators who are members live. For example, Senator Sam Brownback, the Republican cans, the delirious end-timer, has lived in the cult's house in Washington. Raytheon CEO Tom Phillips and other figures in the military-industrial complex pay the bills. The fellowship specializes in taking over the lives of potentially powerful individuals who have become somehow ruined and promising them dominion in the world if they will play along. Watergate dirty trickster Charles Colson, when he was on his way to prison and suddenly powerless, was recruited and turned his life over to the fellowship. Colson's prison fellowship ministries is a subordinate unit of the cult, with its tentacles in the most prisons in the United States. So you recruit ex-cons into your organization that will be willing to do criminal activity for the Christian Coalition. And I remember reading the diaries of Lord Colchester, Baron Colchester, Speaker of the House, when he was trying to fix British support in Genoa as the key to Italy, British to take over Italy. During the time of the Carbonari, he actually visits the prisons. It makes no sense. He visits the prisons with the Pallavicini family and says no more about it. But all I can think of with that is when you visit a prison and you're trying to set up a revolution, the point is to find out who you could possibly use for that revolution. And we might talk about that sometime in the future regarding Napoleon, the Carbonari, and the Pallavicini family. The Pallavicini family, very important in Nazi communism and terrorism in Italy. Actually, Casa Pound was recently investigated for, I guess not so recently, but 2011 terrorist activity, shootings by two Senegalese individuals. Even though they were black, they were supporters of this Nazi communist organization, and that ties directly into Pallavicini family and their legacy. So, still going on today. Same things that we've been exposing happening in the 1970s, still going on today. But interesting. I never thought about the prison fellowship, prison ministries being used for that, but that actually makes a lot of sense. Uh, After Tom DeLay was zapped, Charles Colson became DeLay's personal guru. Colson's militancy for the end times war on Muslims has made him a congenial companion to Jack Abramoff in their keeping of DeLay. Abramoff has repeatedly led Tom to Israel to call for all-out war against the Arabs. And Christian Coalition co-founder Pat Robertson was himself a product of the fellowship magic. Robertson was the good-for-nothing playboy son of Senator A. Willis Robertson, a Republican from VA, Virginia, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. Pat began speaking in tongues and uttering prophecies under the guidance of Harold Bredesen. Remember hearing about that, I think, from our friend John Brisson, training agent of the fellowship program, who had proved himself to the highest circles of British intelligence. Pat Robertson started off as an assistant pastor to Bredesen, whose intelligence partners, the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship, raised the money to expand Robertson and Bredesen's Virginia-based Christian broadcasting network towards global power status. In the 1990s, Abramoff became DeLay's main financial manager, the principal architect of the system of political action committees through which Enron and later donors such as Abramoff's Indian casinos made DeLay a colossus. Grover Norquist handled the DeLay-Abramoff machine, relations to Washington's K Street lobbyists, and more of the big money. Ralph Reed moved on in 1997 after 8 years as a Christian Coalition executive director and set up his businesses as a private consultant. Reed's reputation as a cold-blooded political hitman made him a desirable potential leading operative for the circles then preparing to run Texas Governor George W. Bush for president. But in the first stage of that project, Virginia Bush was to be portrayed as a compassionate moderate so that Reed could not be brought aboard right away. Could he be kept in the orbit of the Bush managers and kept happy until needed? The New York Times reported that Bush planner Karl Rove got in touch with Enron Corporation about Reed's virtues, and that Enron thereupon signed up Reed as a consultant. But Reed boasts that while Enron paid him to push Enron's deregulation agenda through the political process, the Bush campaign simultaneously paid him. From early 1999, Reed's Century Strategies was one of the primary firms used by the campaign. Reed stayed on with Enron, taking in about $300,000 until Enron blew up and the state of California, looted by Enron's deregulation scheme, was brought into bankrupt decline. Footnote: the International Finance Committee pushed hard in the mid-1990s for individual states to allow deregulated looting of the electricity market by energy private companies. Enron, bolstered in Washington by Tom DeLay, was the banker's main political lobbying vehicle for that end. DeLay became House Whip in 1994 and then created the first leadership pact, Americans for a Republican Majority, called ARMPAC, devoted to paying for the election of anti-regulatory politicians. Enron hosted ARM PAC's first fundraising event in DeLay's hometown of Houston. Of the $280,000 that was initially raised, the amount that came directly from Enron's secret. But Enron's chief executive, Ken Lay, gave at least $50,000, and Enron's vice chairman kicked in $25,000. And Enron soon contributed more than $500,000, a large part of money that DeLay distributed from ARMPAC to pro-deregulation campaigns. Under pressure principally from Enron, California passed the nation's first state electricity deregulation law in 1996. Other states soon followed suit, bowing to the Texas-Washington power access. Going on, in the 2004 election, Reed officially ran the Bush-Cheney campaign in southeastern U.S., the Old South. Using Christian coalition networks he deployed, Reed was chief coordinator of the Bush national strategy for mobilizing religious mobs and demoralizing minority voters. Target: Congress. During the first George W. Bush administration, Congress was, for the most part, neutralized. As a result, the blatant lies that led to the Iraq War, the Abu Ghraib torture policy, and Ashcroft assault on civil liberties went essentially unchallenged. In the Senate, the presiding officer, Vice President Dick Cheney, had been known as the woodshed. Members who get out of line are sent to him and whipped. DeLay has ruled the House of Representatives, installing his own former aide, Dennard Hastert, Republican from Illinois, a convicted pedophile in the Pagegate scandal, along with not convicted but associated Ben Sass, the big guy in Nebraska, was part of the Pagegate scandal and got off. I don't think he was punished at all. As House Speaker in 1999 and making himself Majority Leader in 2002, known as the Hammer, DeLay's office is decorated with old South-style bullwhip. His sponsors created slush funds for secret contributions to be given out to Republican candidates who would be under his sway and withheld from those who crossed him. He took control of Texas legislators, candidates getting allegedly illegal corporate campaign contributions that got 3 DeLay aides indicted in order to rig Texas congressional district lines to increase his power in the House. The House Ethics Committee repeatedly admonished DeLay, so the Republican chairman of the committee was fired, and 2 other Republican committee members were kicked out, all replaced by DeLay allies. The House ethics rules were charged to protect DeLay from challenges. Democrats have been excluded from conference committees, which prepare the final versions of congressional bills, such as budgets, so that whatever happens in the floor debate or votes, DeLay, Cheney, and the lieutenants privately decide all the matters of importance. Reid played a particularly ugly role in the emasculation of Congress. As chairman of the Georgia Republican Party in 2001-02, he personally coordinated 2 obscene 2002 campaigns. African American Democratic Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. Interesting. Reid played a particularly ugly role in the emasculation of Congress. As chairman of the Georgia Republican Party in 2001-2002, he personally coordinated 2 obscene 2002 campaigns. African American Democratic congressional woman Cynthia McKinney, a courageous critic of the regime's coup process following the September 11, 2011 attacks, was slandered as anti-Semitic and driven out of Congress, and Reid defeated Democratic Senator Max Cleland, who had lost an arm and both legs in Vietnam, depicted Cleland as unpatriotic and helpful to terrorism. I remember that. That was a big point back in the old post 9/11 days. How I miss those days. I really do. Target the judiciary. Judiciary. So we just did target Congress. This is target the judiciary. With the tempo of public attacks against DeLay rapidly increasing in recent months, he and his state religion and entourage have jumped out to incite mob actions against the judicial branch of government. Pat Robertson demanded congressional rule changes or a constitutional amendment to disable opposition to confirmation of state religion fanatics as judges. Using judges who declined to order reinsertion of Terry Schiavo's feeding tube as a pretext, DeLay threatened the time will come for men responsible for this to answer for their behavior. Senator John Cornyn, Republican Texas, chimed in that the perception that judges are making political decisions could lead people to engage in violence. DeLay was the featured speaker to April 8, 2005 lynch mob-style meeting entitled Confronting the Judicial War on Faith, run by DeLay's hardcore Texas supporters calling themselves the Judeo-Christian Council for Constitutional Restoration. Our next step, whatever it is, must be more than rhetoric. DeLay told the meeting Michael Schwartz, chief of staff to Senator Tom Coburn, Republican from Oklahoma, said there that if a judge misbehaves, then the judge's term has simply come to an end. The president gives them a call and says, clean out your desk. The Capitol Police will be in to help you find your way home. According to the Washington Post, April 9, 2005, lawyer Edwin Vieira told the meeting that the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin had a slogan and it worked out very well for him. Whenever he ran into difficulty, no man, no problem. So that no one would miss the point about killing judges, Vieira adverted twice to this Stalin adage about the killing of opponents. The full Stalin quote is, "Death solves all problems. No man, no problem." Interesting. Homeschooling advocate Michael P. Ferris of Virginia told Delay meeting that Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy should be impeached and that congressmen who won't impeach him should themselves be impeached. He said judicial power should be nullified by abolishing the use of binding judicial precedents, by allowing Congress to vacate court decisions, and by mass impeachment of judges. And if about 40 of them get impeached, suddenly a lot of guys would be retiring. The political point was not left to the imagination. Ferris said, Medicare is a bad idea, and Social Security is a horrible idea when run by the government. Ferris was the founder of the pro-theocracy Patrick Henry College for homeschooled students in North Virginia, very much like Christendom College. The school's namesake, American revolutionary politician Patrick Henry, tried to impose some of the state-enforced religion under Virginia law, which was bitterly opposed by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. James Madison, the better of those two. Seeing Patrick Henry as a cheap demagogue, Jefferson wrote to Madison on December 8, 1784, joking that, "What we have to do, I think, is devoutly pray for his death." Jefferson and Madison successfully pushed through a Virginia ban on government involvement in religion, a model for the similar clause in the U.S. Bill of Rights. Before us in the coming period is a plain test whether the founders' beautiful work will be preserved and the present threat to life of the republic will be overcome. So if you're actually loyalty to your country, are constantly they're trying to destroy the history and rewrite history. That's what the conservative revolutionary. That's what the German conservative revolution tried to do. And traditionalists like Joseph de Maistre, founder of 19th century traditionalism, that's what they all try to do. It's what Tradition, Family, and Properties, Plinio de Oliveira, and Nicolas Gomez de Villa. That's what they do. And Plinio de Oliveira basically says this. He says that it's more about fantasy than it's drawing from a secret world of fantasy where the fantasy is truer than real history. You know, um, typical garbage Gnosticism, but that's the real enemy. Are these people that are trying to rewrite your history and rewrite the myth of history um, for you to serve their cynical agendas. But here's some of the inserts that are in this. I think there's two windows because it's a magazine, so it has little asides. So we're going to read this one. It's called Traveling Partnership. The shadow partners, Ralph Reed, Jack Abramoff, and Norquist, have been dragged into the news with Tom DeLay as FBI, a federal grand jury, and U.S. Senate investigators probe looting of Indian tribes, fraud, and money laundering. Several trips abroad by the operatives and DeLay are under scrutiny as small leads into huge tangled web. May 2000 trip. Tom DeLay had a week-long golfing vacation in Scotland arranged by Jack Abramoff, which was paid for by the casino-owning Choctaw Indians of Mississippi and the internet gambling firm eLottery, whose funds were funneled through the National Center for Public Policy Research, NCPPR, a lobbying center for Indian casinos and Social Security privatization, with Abramoff on its board. 2 months after the trip, DeLay broke with other House Republicans and killed a Republican bill that would have outlawed online gambling such as internet casinos. See, the Republicans at least tried to do something that wasn't degenerate, you know. And this so-called Christian coalition blocked it. Wow. Online gambling interests fought the bill through their Internet Gaming Council, whose strategist and paid consultant was Grover Norquist, operating through his lobbying firm Janus Merritt. The world's biggest online casino company, Abramoff's client, Israeli-owned Cassava Enterprises, based in Gibraltar, reportedly contributed $1.5 million dollars to the NCPPR in 2003. August 2002 trip. Abramoff, former DeLay aide Michael Scanlon, religious manager Ralph Reed, Representative Robert Ney, a Republican from Ohio, and U.S. government procurement official David Savavian took a lavish golfing vacation to Scotland. The trip was sponsored by the NCPPR and Abramoff's private charity, the Capital Athletic Foundation, with money taken from Indian tribes. Abramoff and his lobbying partner Scanlon are currently under investigation. This is in 2005 on allegations of looting over $60 million in fees and contributions from Indian tribes who own gambling casinos. Representative Ney, the House Administrative Committee chairman, was at the time of the trip working on a bold scheme by Abramoff. The Texas Tagua tribe El Paso casino was closed down by state government action because of an anti gambling crusade secretly organized by Abramoff and paid for by rival casinos and run publicly through Reed and his Christian coalition networks. Then Abramoff arranged for the Taguas to pay him and Scanlon's millions to campaign to reopen the casino. Ney met with Taguas soon after. Being jammed by the Choctaw Indians. Here we go. Scotland trip promising to amend his national election reform bill to override the closing of Texas casino. Ney didn't deliver, and the casinos remained closed. Ney had previously used his congressional position to help Abramoff and Scanlon to take over the casino cruise line Sun Cruise, pressuring the line's owner, Gus Boulis, to sell out to Abramoff. Boulis was soon murdered, gangland style. Abramoff's old friend Savavian, as Norquist's partner at Janus Merritt, had been the registered lobbyist for the Interactive Gaming Council and the National Indian Gaming Association. November 2004, President Bush appointed Savavian head of the Office of Federal Procurement Policy. He is supposed to see the scandals over military and other competitive sourcing are quieted. At the 2004 Republican convention, Reed confessed that he had taken millions of dollars from Indian casinos owners and Abramoff schemes in several states, and that he had passed out great sums to state-level Christian coalition groups. The campaign against gambling interests rivaling the casinos played, paying Reed. Whew. The Alabama Christian Coalition immediately issued an open letter, September 30th, 2004, defending the long, close relationship of the leaders to Reed and quoting from Reed that they had no direct knowledge about his partnership and about his partner Abramoff's clients. The relevant issue appears to have been Abramoff's victims, the Choctaws of Mississippi, who want to block gambling competition across the state border in Alabama. Both houses of the Alabama state legislature have now passed variations of the bill that would compel such groups as the Christian Coalition, which buy advertising designed to influence legislation, such as that on gambling regulation, to disclose the source of their funds. A similar Alabama bill last year was killed by the filibuster by Christian Coalition allies. They are filibustering the present bill, astonishingly enough, while simultaneously demanding the elimination of the right to filibuster in the United States Congress in aid of their attack on the judiciary. August 2006 trip. There's a wasp sitting right next to me. Representative Tom Feeney, a Republican from Florida, reported that Abramoff's NCPPR paid for Feeney's Scottish golfing jaunt with Abramoff and Reed. It had just been announced the previous month that Reed would become chairman of the 2004 Bush-Cheney campaign for the southeastern United States. Later, Feeney would help by promoting touchscreen voting programs for the U.S. in the 2004 election. A few weeks after the August 2003 trip, headlines began spotlighting the disappearance of millions from Indian casino owners' tribal accounts into lobbyist scams. And Abramoff Reed Norquist delay fabric began unraveling. Okay. And that entire casino establishment all links back to Meyer Lansky and the associated Italian mob and British intelligence and the mega group, Israel's mega group. Okay, here's the last window. George W. Bush funds faith-based fascism. One of the major vehicles with George Bush has used to recruit the foot soldiers in his state-based religion is the White House Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiative. Bush created this office in 2002 by executive order. That's unconstitutional. After the Congress refused to pass legislation which would permit him to transfer government programs to government paid private religious entities. Through this vehicle, the Bush administration has handed out billions of dollars, 1.17 billion in 2003 and $2 billion in 2004. According to its official reports, the church groups and charities which are now beholden to the federal government. So far, the agencies dispensing these funds are Department of Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Justice, Labor, Education, and Agriculture, and Agency for International Development. The White House claims that up to 10% of the federal grants, excluding the formula based grants to states, went to faith based organizations in 2004, up from 8.1% in 2003. That's a lot of money for the GOP's Get Out the Vote Fund, or perhaps fundees. President Bush addressed 250 to 300 representatives of faith based organizations in Washington on March 1st. On the eve of the vote by the House of Representatives on a bill which would permit religious organizations receiving job training grants to make hiring decisions on the basis of the employees' religious beliefs. That is, the bill would exclude religious groups from anti discrimination laws enacted under civil rights legislation. Bush threatened that should the House not pass the bill, the Job Training Improvement Act, which Bush is marketing as charitable choice legislation, he will continue to put the bill's provisions into effect under an executive order he issued last year. The Job Training Improvement Act did pass on March 3rd. Bush's speech to those he called leaders in the armies of compassion was one of the long threat to mow down those who refuse to change America along his desires. The culture of opposition in government that is unfriendly to faith based organizations will be taken on. Bush said that states and municipalities are dragging their feet on the faith based front. I told the governors they need to set up faith based offices when I met them on February 28th, he said. Okay, well, that is the end of the article. We thoroughly read it through. I got 6 likes. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll continue this. If you guys buy some yerba mate, we'll continue this series. If not, we are going to become a balding nutrition channel. We'll talk about how to avoid hair loss, and that's about it. So thanks for watching. That's a perfect time. Like, it's a perfect number, 1:30. Please give me a like, share with friends. At Reason Power on Twitter, Reason_Power. Go check out some tweets. We always got spicy uh, exposures of people within the Dugan network, and we're just protecting America, trying to make America American again. Okay, cool. Bye bye. 8 feds watching now. 8 feds. Gee. All right, bye bye. Have a good one. Thanks for watching.